in a move that was surprising more so for its timing than its actual execution or the result itself, in a move that surely has made the vast majority of Giants fans very happy in a crappy loss season. The organization announced they have parted ways with both head coach Ben McAdoo and general manager Jerry Reese. And again, for Giants fans, I don't know if it's necessarily a reason to celebrate, because ultimately the reason this happened is because your head coach was a failure and ultimately your general manager is a failure. You are a major market team, one of the most prestigious, historic organizations in the NFL, and you could argue professional sports, and you are staring down the barrel of a 2-10 season, talking about getting a top 3 pick in the 2018 NFL draft. This is not a reason to celebrate. It's a reason maybe to be excited about the future. It is a reason to be glad that this era is over, but no reason to celebrate, because there is nothing to celebrate. Your team sucks and your organization is a freaking mess. And when it's so bad that you fire both your head coach and your general manager during the season, that's when you know you are a mess. And they are. And take it as a Bears fan who has been a fan of an organization that's been a mess for years and years and years. I know a mess when I see one. And the Giants are complete and total mess. But this was the necessary move. This was the move that had to be made. And I think for Giants fans, the move that's probably more exciting, deep down, like fundamentally, is the firing of Jerry Reese. Like, Ben McAdoo, you knew was cooked. You knew he was a lame duck. You knew he was gone, whether it be now or 4 games from now. You knew he was gone. But there was still that lingering doubt about whether or not Jerry Reese would still be around. And you'll look at a guy like Jerry Reese. It's one of those things. He's been there for a long, long time. Helped construct 2 Super Bowl championship teams. True. But an example of you stay around too long and the hero becomes the villain. And that's exactly what had happened with Jerry Reese. And the simple thing is that in recent years, he just hadn't drafted that well. Sure, he stumbled into an Odell Beckham Jr., but you look at some of the other draft picks, and throughout the draft, this team just has not done very particularly well in the draft. And when you are a general manager and you do not draft well, you put yourself in a very, very bad space to where you try to address those shortcomings in free agency like the Giants have had to do under Jerry Reese the past 2 off seasons to try and field a playoff type of team, knowing ultimately that the shelf life of that type of philosophy of building a team is very, very short in today's NFL, and ultimately when the bottom does fall out, it collapses and your boat sinks to the damn bottom. How about that? Boat. Giants. I know, F me, right? So, Jerry Reese's time had most certainly come. He's the one that ultimately promoted Ben McAdoo, that helped make the Giants locker room the mess that it was. Sure, he didn't make the injuries happen for guys like Odell Beckham Jr. and Brandon Marshall, but even if those guys were playing, how much better would this Giants team really be? I mean, if you really, truly, honestly take a look at it, maybe a couple of more wins, they'd still not be very good. Because we found out ultimately last year was a fluke. Ben McAdoo was no leader of men, and he was over his head immensely. So they both had to go. What is really striking to me about this, though, and the stupidity of this whole organization, and talking about now how much of a mess they have become, is we allow the whole thing with Eli Manning to go down after 212 games, 210 consecutive starts in a Giants uniform, 2 Super Bowls being the guy since midway through the 2004 season. You allow Ben McAdoo to bench Eli Manning. And again, not for the 3rd-round pick Davis Webb that you just took, where it might be important to see what he may or may not have to help you determine what you're going to do for the 2018 draft, but Geno Smith, a guy who failed elsewhere, it's the New York Jets. You have no long-term future with Geno Smith, and you know that. So you're benching the guy that has been your past and present for over a decade, that you've enjoyed success with, you've won Super Bowls with, for somebody else's cast-off, for Rex Ryan's cast-off. How stupid does that sound? Then to sit there and go into that game in Oakland, lose that game, and now all of a sudden the Tish and Mara families want to decide to fire McAdoo and Reese, and then they decide they're going to make it known that Eli's going to be back starting, then what the hell was any of this for to begin with? Why in the hell wouldn't ownership have overruled them when it came to Eli Manning and the decision to bench him in the first goddamn place? And look, I don't care what you want to say about coaches and general managers and personnel power and so on and so forth. Ultimately, when you are the owner, you are the ownership group, the ownership families, you are the HNIC of all that you see when it comes to that team. If you don't want something to happen, it just does not happen. Period. And if the coach or the general manager doesn't fall in line, then you replace them with somebody else who does. And it's that simple. That is one of the perks of owning a team. Ultimately, the buck stops somewhere. And the buck should stop with the ownership group. And the fact that the Tisches and the Maras allowed this hot garbage to happen, to where you bench the guy that had been the face of the franchise. I'm not a big fan of Eli, but I'm just saying, he'd been the face of the franchise for over a decade. You won 2 Super Bowls with, and to do it, not to see what you've got in the future in Davis Webb in this lost season and potentially manipulate yourself to tank and get a high draft pick, but you're doing it with Geno Smith and Rex Ryan's reject. And you allow this to happen. You allow Eli's consecutive game streak to be snapped, to go out there and lose to Oakland, to then fire the head coach and general manager anyways. If you were going to do this shit, then why in the hell didn't the ownership group of the Giants fire McAdoo and Reese as soon as the announcement was made that they were going to bench Eli? Because clearly they weren't down with it. Clearly they didn't support it. Clearly they didn't like it. Because if you're going to sit there and say, well, they saw it, they gave him a week for it to work out, and they didn't like it, so they canned him, well, that's pretty stupid. You clearly weren't on board with it to begin with. Why? You only allowed it to happen 1 week anyway. So why the hell did you allow it to happen in the first place? I mean, this is insane. And again, it really doesn't make any sense, because now, in a lost season where you're thinking about what's Eli Manning's future with this team going to be, are you actually going to bother keeping him in 2018? I don't know how you could at this point, but if you didn't, you're talking about either releasing him or potentially trying to trade him. You know, what happens if he gets hurt and he tears an ACL or he yokes up his shoulder or something like that? Why in the hell would you put him in the game when you have absolutely nothing to gain and the only thing you have to do is lose? Or if you don't lose, you lose out on a premier draft position in the 2018 NFL Draft. What perk, what benefit is there? The damage has already been done. You've already benched Eli. You've ended the consecutive game streak, the consecutive start streak. Why in the hell go back to it now? This makes absolutely no freaking sense. And it just, again, is emblematic of the mess that this Giants organization has become. And it is poor reflection on the leadership, the ownership, not to mention with the whole Josh Brown situation. But now you look at this and you say, what the hell are you doing? You allow McAdoo to make this move to then undercut it a week later by firing him and the general manager. Yes, both of them should have been fired, but as soon as the whole thing started with Eli Manning and the decision was made and the way it was made and how it was made and who it was made for, the curtain should have been pulled, the rug should have been yanked out from under him right then and there. This is ridiculous. Why in the hell are you starting Eli now? What do you have to gain there? What possible good can come out of this? The answer is very simple. Nothing. You've already benched Eli. Keep him there. The damage has already been done. And if anything, putting him back in the game as a starter a week after benching him just makes you look even worse.